Hello, welcome back to my channel. Christopher Taylor here with Sovereign Harmony. Good to have you guys with me again. Today is March 15th. It's Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday, about 4:30 local time for me. Here's a look at the planets as of right at this moment. I wanted to come in and talk about some big astrological shifts happening, especially in this month of March. And it's going to be leading up to a couple months from now when we get another Mercury retrograde, eclipses, and whatnot. But I'll come back in a few weeks to talk about that stuff. Today, what I want to focus on, three things. So the first one is Mars. So Mars is actually right here, about to exit the shadow zone. So Mars had been retrograde from October 30th to January 12th. Okay. But the zone in the chart where Mars has been, um, it's essentially been in the sign of Gemini since August 20th. So it entered Gemini August 20th. It's been there ever since. So it's been a while. It's been a good 7 months or so. And what we're going to see is not only the end of Mars leaving that shadow zone from that retrograde, but it's going to change signs. So it'll be the first sign change from Mars in over 7 months. So that's pretty significant. We'll talk about more details there in a second. Another big one is Saturn. We see Saturn right here. That has just recently on March 7th entered Pisces. Okay. Saturn takes about 29 years to go around the zodiac. The last time Saturn was in Pisces was around 1996, I believe. Yeah. I think it was spring of 96 when it exited Pisces for Aries. So it hasn't been there since the mid 90s, essentially. So we'll talk about some of the details with that. And then finally, we have Pluto, which is here at the 29th degree, almost the end of Capricorn. Capricorn is where it's been since 2008. Long time. Pluto takes a while to move around the zodiac, and it will be entering Aquarius here in later this month. I think March 23rd, I believe. Just actually a couple days before Mars enters Cancer. So there are lots of sign changes going on, pretty major things happening here. And so the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, we're talking about like the 1790s, essentially, was the last time that Pluto was in the sign of Aquarius. So not something that happens very often. So this would be unique to anyone alive today. We're not going to see anything like this again. So just to kind of start, going back to Mars. So like I said, Mars entered Gemini August 20th, went retrograde October 30th to January 12th. So it was at this degree, about 25 degrees Gemini, when it went retrograde on October 30th. And so it went back, and now it's gone forward, and now it's taken all the way, till now here in mid-March for it to get back to that point where it went retrograde. So that's called the shadow zone. And so it's been months and months of Mars shifting around, not really moving as much as it would like to. Mars is a fiery energy, and going retrograde for Mars is not always the best use of the energy. So we've been kind of stalled the last several months and indecisive. Part of that Mars retrograde has been a square. You can see 25 degrees here to 25 degrees there. Neptune, that square to Neptune has been ongoing for these past several months. So it's been very difficult when it comes to really getting a sense of getting our feet on the ground and moving in one direction and committing to one direction. There's been lots of options on the table, lots of things switching around, and collectively, it's been a time of information because we got Mars is in Gemini. Gemini is a sign that has to do with information, and lots of information coming through the media and whatnot that contradicts the original information. Like, we can go into some details, I'll have some examples and whatnot, but, things that we were told were definitively true about the whole illness and other things associated with it that we're finding out it's like pretty much what we were told was definitely not true in the beginning and things like that. So those kind of themes of being confused about really what to believe and finding out that the true truth is actually more in line with what we were told was definitely not the truth in the beginning, right? And also to add to this final square to Neptune right now, we've got the Sun and Mercury. And that's interesting too. So Mercury is just about to meet up with the Sun right on Neptune here in the next couple of days. And so that's what's called a superior conjunction. So this is halfway between Mercury retrogrades, essentially. So the last time Mercury was conjunct the Sun was in early January, right in the middle of the last Mercury retrograde. That's how it happened. So you're going to have An inferior conjunction with Mercury and the Sun right in the middle of a Mercury retrograde, and then you're going to have the superior conjunction between the two when you're halfway between Mercury retrogrades. And so that's what we have here. So it's kind of like a full moon energy. It's like a culmination where we could think of the inferior conjunction as a seed planting, and this is the culmination. So this just really adds another layer to the Mars retrograde. So essentially this idea that things have just been hard to pin down in the last several months, and hard to, again, know which direction to take, know what to decide to do. But right now we're exiting that. We're exiting that zone, and things are going to get a little more clearer in the coming days to weeks to months. So that fog is going to begin to lift a little bit. So that's good news. So that we had that going on. As far as Saturn goes, I mentioned it just entered Pisces on March 7th. So newly into Pisces, hasn't been there since the mid-90s. And Saturn is this planet that has to do with reality, with just getting real in general. And there's no way to fool Saturn. In other words, it's a taskmaster. Got to get on task. And Pisces is kind of this energy that's very different than that. It's related more to Neptune, and so it's undefined, etc. It's dreamy. Okay, so this is a time when Saturn's moving through Pisces that we're solidifying dreams. We're putting our ideas into solid form. Okay, so anything we've been imagining, this is a time to be actually physically putting things together. So it's not fast. It's a gradual thing. It'll be in Pisces in almost 3 years. So I think through like 2026 or so. So it's going to be a gradual time of things solidifying, okay? But also on the other side of that, because it's about getting real, any fantasies and delusions, those start to get faced essentially. And so going back to the idea of this Mars retrograde squaring Neptune and the kind of deception and inability to really be clear about what's true and what's not true, etc. So this has a lot to do with that as well. In that any deceptions that have been out there, Saturn's going to have a way as it moves through Pisces of setting the record straight, essentially. Okay. And we can already see some of that happening. I've just kind of like opened up the feelers and the observation. And there's a few things just in this last week that I just came across that really have this flavor. One thing being, I think Congress passed a unanimous bill to look into the origins of COVID, right? And this was something that was trying to be avoided for a long time. And so this is not even a partisan thing. This is like everybody wants this done, right? And was likely to lead to, implicating a certain country, right, that we're not supposed to talk about out loud, and also a certain lab, right? And then the way that lab was funded and who was involved in that, et cetera. So this is gonna really set things straight with anything. So this is one of those things. Another one is the footage from the January 6th event was more of it was able to be seen in the last week or so. And it painted a very different picture if you're using your own eyes as you watch it than what we were told and fed, right? Because this, again, goes back to the idea of finding out what's actually true. So that is complicating things. It's making it not so black and white. Let's put it that way. So that's just another idea. And then another one that I saw has to do with the big tech censorship, teaming up with government. And so there was suspicion of this and accusations of this, et cetera. But now we actually have, people coming forward and things like that. So you've got actual government collusion with media, essentially big tech, social media, for censoring, Americans and things like that. So that's all starting to, be brought out into the open as well. So just some examples, but we're going to start seeing a whole lot more of this unfolding over the next few years with Saturn and Pisces. So anything that has been unclear or any kind of deception or lie is going to be, it's going to be put in front of our faces in a way that it's hard to deny what the actual truth is. Saturn, again, doesn't care about your story. Saturn cares about what is and what isn't. So it's very matter of fact. And so that's what's going to happen. So stories will start dissolving. But again, the positive side of this is our ideals and our what we've been imagining and envisioning for our lives can start solidifying. You see, so it has a double-edged sword aspect to it. So that brings us to Pluto. So I mentioned Pluto, very slow-moving planet. It has been in Capricorn since 2008. It hasn't been in Aquarius, where it's about to enter here next week. Hasn't been there since the late 1790s, so a long time ago. And so it's got some pretty big ramifications as far as collective, on the collective level anyway. It's more of a collective shift than a personal one. And so just to kind of review with Pluto and Capricorn, when Pluto entered Capricorn, Capricorn has to do with like government and like restriction energy, et cetera. It's when the pandemic hit, it was a Saturn Pluto conjunction right in Capricorn. And everyone, I remember thinking this is going to be a weird, something's going to happen here, very soon. That happened in January of 2020. And then all of a sudden you see this amping up of restriction and amping up of government power and government spending, right? It's all Capricorn, right? And so Pluto has to do with big transformations in this. When it entered in 2008, this is when the big financial crisis happened and all the big banks got bailed out, right? This is, again, the government this is Capricorn, stepping in, bailing out, okay? And the entire time that Pluto has been in Capricorn, we've kind of had this theme, right? We had like Occupy Wall Street was like 2011 or whatever. So this is kind of like the people rising up against big government, big corporations, et cetera. Because that's the definition of fascism right there, right? And now all of a sudden, what happens this past week, just a few days ago, today's Wednesday, it was on Saturday, it's like 4 or 5 days ago, there was a second biggest bank collapse in U.S. history, followed by the third biggest bank collapse in U.S. history a couple days later. So we're in another state and this is with Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn. So literally, in the 0 degrees and the 29 degrees points are the strongest points for manifesting the energy that's associated with the planets in the signs involved. And so here we are at the 29th degree of Capricorn, and the same theme that started at 0 degrees Capricorn is now happening here as we finish it out. So it really represents this overall transformation of the financial systems and how, and governments involved and how that all works. And since we're seeing the collapse of all of this, this is telling us that there's got to be a different way, that a different way has to emerge. Okay. And lo and behold, Aquarius is all about, when Pluto's in Aquarius anyway, it's all about transforming society essentially. So, and the way people live. And what I've heard, just even though Pluto hasn't entered Aquarius yet, it's already inklings of this. On one side, you're hearing about this idea of 15-minute cities. You're also hearing about this idea of freedom cities, right? Both of which are very Pluto and Aquarius. It's a very specific adjustment to how people live and move about, right? And also we have like what is it called, Chat GPT, which is like a talk to text AI software. So it could basically, you just type in a few words and it can pump out like a whole report for you, and might have errors in it because it's not perfect, but generally speaking, it's going to be probably, pretty much 80% of it will be pretty accurate in terms of accurate relative to what's out there on the web. So to the degree that what's out there on the web hasn't been censored already, then it's going to be pretty accurate. But the idea being AI, that's very Aquarian in general. And with Pluto entering Aquarius, we could see this transformation of how AI interacts with society. And that's going to last a good 20 years. So this is not a short transit. So Pluto and Aquarius, we're talking about from now until like into the early 2040s. Okay. Now there's, again, positives and negatives, right? There's probably going to be some very positive developments when it comes to technology. Okay. Could be like medical breakthroughs, things of that nature that we could see over the next 20 years, et cetera. But there's also that negative side, that idea of AI, how much should artificial intelligence be integrated into society? How much should we rely on it? And of course, there's going to be the entire 20-year period is going to be a battle about how much versus how little, it's always going to be some that want more, some that want less. And where do we land with that? So this is already on the horizon. And when Pluto enters Aquarius, this is just going to get more and more prominent on the front burner. Okay. But when Pluto enters Aquarius, it's not going to be there permanently. It's going to be there from March, March 23rd, I think I said, till early June, I think it is. So it's only a few months for its initial entry. Then it backs into Capricorn again. And then it won't be until January 2024, so about 10 months from now, that it'll jump over that point into Aquarius again. So it's into Aquarius in March, back to Capricorn in June, then into Aquarius again in January, and then in September of 2024, it'll back into Capricorn for the last time for a couple of months. And in November of 2024, now it's in Aquarius where it will be for a long time. Okay. But this whole transition period, the next year and a half or so between now and the fall of 2024, Pluto is going back and forth. So I think what we're going to see is the overlap of these themes, kind of like what we're seeing right now. So more banking issues, right, as we pull out of Pluto and Capricorn, but also more of this talk of AI, where it belongs, is talk of, how cities will be organized and whatnot. And of course, the negative side of that is using the environment as a reason to essentially lock people in, right? Versus the other way that could be used. There's going to be positive potentials for reorganizing how we live, but also many negative potentials. And so we're going to have to navigate that over the years coming. But the next year and a half, we're going to overlap between those two themes, between Pluto and Capricorn, Pluto and Aquarius. So it's not going to be ironed out completely yet. Whereas Saturn is in Pisces and it will not back into Aquarius. It's in Pisces at least for the next couple of years before it starts flirting with Aries. I believe it won't enter there till like 2025 or something like that, 2026. So anyway, so that kind of wraps us up as far as where we are now. Like I said, I will be back probably in a few weeks because we've got a Mercury retrograde in late April to early May, and there's also 2 eclipses happening late April and early May. So that's just going to be a good inflection point to come on in and talk about some things as well. But for right now, we've got, again, the true end of Mars retrograde, even though it's been direct since January 12th. Now it's outside the shadow. And it's the end of that square to Neptune that's been going on off and on since last fall. We've got the superior conjunction of Mercury and the Sun, signifying, again, halfway point between the Mercury retrogrades and a point of things moving forward. We've got Saturn entering Pisces and what that means. And we've got Pluto that's going to go back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn over the next, say, 16, 18 months or so. So with that, let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to field any questions. If you are interested in having your chart looked at, please let me know. We can go over that and talk about these energies specifically, where that fits in. In my website, sovereignharmony.com. Feel free to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. And also like my page on Facebook. I post a lot more frequently on Facebook and Telegram and Twitter. I have accounts on all those sites, and those are maybe 2 to 3 times a week anyway. So a little more often than I do these. So feel free to follow me there as well. So with that, I will see you again in a few weeks to talk about the eclipses and that Mercury retrograde coming up. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you then.